What would you do if two little girls showed up at your late wife's grave and one of them asked, "Are you our dad?" That's exactly what happened to Richard Bennett, a powerful CEO, known more for boardrooms than bedtime stories. He thought he had lost everything the day his wife Caroline died in a tragic accident. But 3 months later, a single phone call shattered his reality. Caroline had given birth to twins in secret. And now those two daughters, Mia and Chloe, were out there alone and missing. Haunted by guilt and desperate to make things right, Richard begins a race against time through city parks, old shelters, and buried memories to find the children he never knew he had. But what he discovers is far more than two little girls. It's the raw truth about the man he used to be and the father he's now fighting to become. Stay with us, because what begins as a shocking secret will unfold into a powerful journey of redemption, forgiveness, and the true meaning of family. You won't believe how this story ends. The marble of Caroline's headstone was still cold from the morning dew when Richard Bennett dropped the yellow roses onto the ground. He visited every Sunday without fail, CEO suit replaced by a simple coat, his hands too restless to hold a prayer, his eyes too heavy to shed tears. Today, though, something shifted in the air, a whisper of movement behind the mausoleum, a presence. Then came the call. "Mr. Bennett, it's Paul Harris," the voice on the phone said. Richard had barely made it back to his Bentley when his longtime attorney continued. "It's about Caroline. You need to come to my office, now." Richard frowned. "She's dead, Paul." "Yes," Paul said slowly, "but not everything died with her." An hour later, Richard sat across from Paul's mahogany desk, the silence between them growing heavier by the second. Paul slid a yellow folder across the polished wood. "She kept secrets. Ones even I didn't know until yesterday." Richard opened the folder with a scowl until his fingers froze. There, blurry but unmistakable, was Caroline, 8 months pregnant, standing in what looked like an institutional dining hall. The timestamp was from 3 months before her death. Her face was tired, drawn, but peaceful, alive in a way he hadn't seen in years. "This can't be real," Richard murmured. "She was living with me. She was never pregnant." "She wasn't living with you," Richard, Paul said. "Not really. The last 2 months of her life she stayed at Safe Haven Women's Shelter. According to the director, she gave birth to twins." Richard's chest hollowed out in an instant. His entire world tilted like a collapsing skyscraper. Twins, Mia and Chloe. Girls. 8 years old now. But Richard, there's more. They've gone missing from the foster care system. Richard shot to his feet. "That's impossible. If I had daughters, I would know." Paul didn't flinch. "When was the last time you got home before midnight?" "Richard, when did you last have a conversation with Caroline that didn't involve quarterly reports?" The words hit him like punches. He had spent the final months of their marriage consumed by a billion-dollar merger, cold dinners, silent nights, a wife slipping into the shadows. "She would have told me," he whispered, "or she was afraid to." Paul leaned in, voice low. "The girls were seen yesterday, at Greenwood Memorial Park, the cemetery, Caroline's grave." Richard's breath caught. He had been there that morning, watched. He demanded to see more. Paul produced another photo. 2 girls in worn-out hoodies and mismatched sneakers, one smiling shyly, the other glaring at the camera like it had done her wrong. "They have your eyes," Paul said. "Same gray, same shape, same pain." Richard stared at the photo until the edges blurred. For the first time in years, he felt something he hadn't allowed, in a raw, terrifying truth: fear. Not fear of losing power, but fear of what he might have already lost. "Find them," he said, his voice like steel. "Now. I already have people looking. But Richard, when we find them, you need to be ready. These girls have been through more than you can imagine. They don't need a CEO, they need a father." Richard didn't respond. His mind was racing, jumping between regret, confusion, and rage, not just at himself, but at whatever system had let this happen. That night he didn't sleep. He sat in his office staring at the photo of Mia and Chloe, as if willing them to appear through the paper. At 6 a.m., his phone buzzed. A new voice came through, soft but firm. "Mr. Bennett, my name is Laura Myers. I'm a social worker. Paul Harris gave me your number. I believe I can help you." They met at a modest cafe on the east side of LA, a place Richard would never have stepped into before yesterday. Laura was plain-looking, mid-40s, but her eyes were sharper than most boardroom executives. "I knew Caroline," she said gently, stirring her coffee. "We worked together at Safe Haven. She was scared, Mr. Bennett. Not of you specifically, but of the life you shared. She could have come to me." "She tried," Laura said, reaching into her bag and pulling out a small weathered notebook. "She wrote about you, every day, about how she loved you but felt invisible, about how she wanted to protect your daughters from growing up believing money mattered more than love." Richard flipped through the journal, reading her words like they were etched in glass. "She said you were brilliant, but absent, that your house wasn't a home, that she talked to walls more than to you." It was a wound reopening, each word a splinter under his skin. "Where are the girls now?" "That's the problem," Laura sighed. "They ran away from their foster placement. The Thompsons, not a good family. Too many kids, not enough care. They were in it for the check." Something cracked inside Richard. "How do I find them?" Laura placed a hand-drawn map on the table. "Mia drew this before she disappeared. It's a route from the shelter to Greenwood Memorial Park. She left a big red X on your wife's grave." "They know who I am?" Richard asked, his voice unsteady. "They know everything." Caroline showed them photos. Mia used to ask every day, "When will Daddy come for us?" Richard's throat clenched. "And Chloe?" he asked. "Chloe's different," Laura said. "She doesn't believe in fairy tales. She thinks all adults lie, including you." "What do I have to do?" he asked. "You'll have to earn it," Laura said. "You don't get daughters back with a signature. You get them with presence, with time, with love." Richard nodded slowly for the first time in years, unsure of what came next. Then Laura added one last thing. "There's a park near Greenwood, Riverside Park. A caretaker reported seeing two girls sleeping behind the maintenance shed. We should check it out." And so they did. Amid rusting swings and broken benches, they found an old blanket, empty food cans, and a necklace. Caroline's necklace. A small photo locket. Inside her smiling face, thinner than he remembered, but peaceful. And next to her, the faint, dusty outlines of two tiny figures. His daughters. "God," he whispered, clutching it. "I was this close." Before Laura could call the authorities, Richard stopped her. "No police. I don't want them scared. I just want them safe." He stared at the photo again. In it, behind Caroline's shoulder, he noticed a faded sign, "Hope Street Diner." He stood up. "She used to love that place when we were dating," he said. "It's 3 blocks from here." And in that moment, Richard Bennett was no longer the cold man who ran a billion-dollar empire. He was a father on a mission to reclaim a family he never knew he had. We're sorry to pause the story here, but let us ask you something while you wait. Do you think Caroline was right to hide the truth from Richard? And what would you have done if you found out you had children you never knew existed? Tell us in the comments. Also, let us know where you're watching from. And don't forget to like this video if the story moved your heart. The bell above the door of Hope Street Diner jingled faintly as Richard Bennett stepped inside, the scent of burnt coffee and sugar-dusted pastries hitting him like a forgotten memory. The last time he had been here, Caroline had been laughing, young, radiant, full of life. Now she was gone, and in her place, unanswered questions lingered like ghosts in every corner. A woman in her 60s with flour on her apron looked up from behind the counter. Her eyes widened. "You're Richard, Caroline's husband, aren't you?" she asked. He nodded slowly. "You knew her. She came here almost every day, sat in that corner booth, always ordered coffee with milk and toast. And she wrote letters, dozens of them." The woman disappeared into the back and returned with a weathered cardboard box. Inside were over 20 unopened envelopes, each one addressed to him. With trembling hands, Richard opened the first. "Dear Richard, I've tried to say this 100 times. I'm pregnant, with twins, and I'm scared you won't care." He read until his vision blurred. Each word dug deeper into the guilt he'd buried under contracts and conference calls. Caroline had tried again and again, and he hadn't seen her drowning. Suddenly his phone buzzed. Laura Myers. "They were spotted," she said quickly. "2 girls matching the description, behind the maintenance shed in Riverside Park." Richard didn't even answer. He was already out the door. The park was nearly empty. Rusted benches, faded swings swaying in the wind. Laura pointed toward a dilapidated structure near the edge of the lot. They approached cautiously. They're a makeshift camp, a worn blanket, empty tuna cans, and something that made Richard's breath catch. A necklace. Caroline's, the one she always wore. He knelt down and picked it up. Inside the locket was a tiny photo, Caroline thinner but smiling, and behind her a blurry sign he hadn't noticed before, Hope Street Diner. She was here. She brought them here, Richard whispered. They're close, but before Laura could call for backup, Richard grabbed her wrist. No cops, no flashing lights. If they see uniforms, they'll bolt. Let me try first. Laura nodded reluctantly. The next morning, Richard returned to Greenwood Memorial Park and waited on the same bench he always did, a bundle of letters resting on his lap. The sun was dipping low when he heard its footsteps, soft and hesitant. Two small figures appeared from behind a mausoleum. Dirty, thin, wary. They matched the photo exactly. The taller one, Mia, stepped forward with wide, uncertain eyes. Are you? Our dad, Richard, stood slowly, voice hoarse. Yes, my name is Richard. I'm your father. The smaller girl, Chloe, crossed her arms, gaze cold. Where were you when our mom died? The question sliced through him like glass. He dropped to one knee. I didn't know you existed. She tried to tell me. I didn't listen. Chloe's glare hardened. You were too busy, weren't you? He didn't flinch. Yes, and that's my fault, not hers. Mia tugged Chloe's sleeve. He has her eyes. Chloe, but Chloe wasn't convinced. What do you want from us? I want to know you, Richard said. I want to take care of you. If you'll let me. Chloe's voice dropped. Everyone says that. The Thompsons said that too. But then they screamed and locked us out in the cold. Something cracked in Richard. Rage, shame, but more than that, resolve. That won't happen again, he said. I swear. How do we know you're not lying? Chloe challenged. You don't, he said softly. You'll have to let me prove it. Day by day. Laura stepped from behind a tree, keeping her movements slow. Girls, do you remember me? She asked. Mia nodded. You worked with our mom. That's right. And I've been very worried about you. But no one is taking you back to the Thompsons. Not ever, Mia whispered. Can we stay together? Richard nodded immediately. Of course. And if we don't like your house, Chloe asked. He paused. Then you can leave. I won't trap you. Chloe searched his face for a lie. Then finally she said, okay. One night. Only one. At his Brentwood mansion, everything was too clean, too quiet. The girls huddled together in the guest room, insisting on one bed. Richard sat outside the door until they fell asleep. At dawn, he heard small footsteps. He peeked into the kitchen. Chloe was standing in front of the coffee machine like it was a spaceship. Do you know how to make breakfast? She asked. Richard blinked. Not really. The Thompsons always ordered food, she said with a frown. Mama taught us how to make scrambled eggs, Mia added. Then maybe, Richard said with a weak smile, you can teach me. They cooked. Eggs were burned, toast was blackened, the kitchen was a mess. But something was different in the air. Laughter. Then Chloe asked quietly, when are you sending us back? I'm not, Richard said. But you have to do paperwork and stuff. I will, but this is your home now, if you want it to be. That night he found Chloe awake, staring at the ceiling. Why didn't Mama tell us about this house? She asked. Because it wasn't a home, Richard answered, sitting beside her. It was just a place I slept between meetings. Did you love her? He didn't hesitate this time. Yes. I just didn't know how to show it. She turned toward him. Mama said love doesn't count if it's invisible. It was something Caroline had once said too, just before one of their last fights. Chloe turned away, but she didn't say anything else. At least not yet. We're deeply sorry to interrupt this part of the story, but before we continue, let us ask you, do you believe someone like Richard deserves a second chance at fatherhood? And what would you do if you had to earn the trust of two children who had already lost everything? Tell us your thoughts in the comments and let us know which country you're watching from. And if this story touched your heart, please give it a like and send a heart. Your support means the world to us. 2 weeks after Mia and Chloe came to live with him, Richard Bennett sat in his home office staring at a legal form that would change everything, the petition for permanent custody. But this wasn't a deal he could close with charm or a signed contract. This was about trust, about proving every single day that he was more than the man who once missed every dinner, every plea, every call, and the test came sooner than expected. One morning, a sharp voice echoed from the kitchen. "I'm not going to that school," Chloe shouted. Richard rushed out of a video call to find Chloe, red-faced, arms crossed, and Laura Myers gently trying to calm her. "It's a trauma-sensitive program," Laura explained. "They're trained to help kids like I'm not broken," Chloe snapped. "I don't need to be helped. I need people to stop pretending like they know me," Chloe, Richard said, carefully kneeling down. "You're right. No one knows you yet, but I'd like to try." She glared at him. "Why? So you can feel better about yourself." Mia, silent until now, stepped forward. "Because he's trying, Chloe. He's here." "No," Chloe cried. "He's here now. But where was he when Mom was dying? Where was he when we were scared and hungry?" The room fell silent. "I was selfish," Richard said finally. "I live for power, for money, for things that don't matter anymore. And your mother paid the price." Chloe's lips quivered. Then she ran upstairs, slamming her door. An hour later, when Richard checked her room, the window was open. She was gone. They searched every place that mattered: Greenwood Park, the diner, even the cemetery. But it was Mia who finally whispered the most heartbreaking clue. She always said she felt safe where Mom used to be. Safe haven shelter. It had been closed for months, but Richard drove there anyway, and that's where he found her, huddled in the corner of the old dining hall, shivering, pale. She had a fever. Her breath was shallow. "Why did you come?" she whispered as he lifted her gently into his arms. "Because you're my daughter. And fathers don't abandon their children. Not anymore." At the hospital, as machines beeped and nurses moved around them, Chloe gripped his hand weakly. "Was she really going to tell you about us?" Richard nodded. "She left me letters. She was on her way to my office the day she died." "But you didn't see her," Chloe said. "No, because I was too buried in my work to pick up the phone. But that stops now." Chloe leaned her head against his chest. "I'm scared, so am I," he whispered. "But we'll get through this together." Later, Paul Harris arrived with something that made Richard's blood run cold: a recovered phone from Caroline's personal belongings. It showed 3 missed calls to his office, all intercepted by Evelyn Carter, his secretary, who had thought she was protecting him from distractions. Richard closed his eyes, pain crashing over him like a tidal wave. Caroline had died running toward him, and she thought he didn't care. He didn't retaliate. Instead, he poured his grief into change. He sold 40% of his company, started therapy, and spent every evening learning how to braid hair, read bedtime stories, and cook eggs without burning them. When the court date arrived, Richard stood in front of Judge Mitchell, vulnerable in a way no courtroom had ever seen him. "I wasn't there when they needed me most," he admitted. "But every day since I've shown up, I've made changes. Not because the law asked me to, but because love demands it." The state prosecutor pushed back. "Money doesn't heal trauma." That's when Chloe stood up. "He doesn't buy us stuff to make up for it. He's just there, every time I'm scared. When I was sick, he didn't sleep. When Mia has nightmares, he sits by her bed. He's not perfect, but he's our dad." Mia chimed in, voice small but sure. "He's learning, and we are too." The judge nodded slowly, then read the decision. "I hereby grant full legal custody of Mia and Chloe Bennett to Richard Bennett." Tears streamed down Richard's face. The girls leapt into his arms. Weeks passed. Their Sunday visits to Caroline's grave became a ritual of healing, not just grief. Mama Chloe said one morning, placing sunflowers on the headstone, "Dad made French toast today. It was awful, but he tried. And I passed my math test," Mia added. "We even have a chart for chores now. It's kind of annoying, but he says that's love too." Richard kneeled between them and touched the cold stone. "Caroline, I think I finally understand what you were trying to tell me. That love isn't in the grand gestures, it's in the showing up." The wind rustled through the trees like a quiet answer. Months turned into seasons. One autumn morning, Richard woke to laughter and flour on the floor. The girls were trying to make pancakes again, burned of course, but perfect in their imperfection. "Happy Father's Day," Mia shouted. Chloe handed him a handmade card. "Thank you for learning with us. Thank you for being our dad." Richard held them both, realizing that the family Caroline died trying to protect was now finally alive. "Now it's your turn to share with us. Have you ever had to rebuild trust with someone you love? Do you believe it's ever too late to become the parent you should have been? Let us know in the comments. And how do you feel about this story? If it touched your heart, comment no 3. If you're not quite satisfied, comment number 1. If you thought it was just okay, comment number 2. Also, where are you watching from? We'd love to know our global community. Please like, heart, and share this video if you believe second chances can build something beautiful.